Universities are changing everywhere, and in Britain they micromanage you, and to become, you introduced me as a professor. I never made professorship because I wasn't enough of a player, I think, and back in the day I thought that becoming a professor depended on what you write and what you publish, but it doesn't. It depends on the money you bring in now and who you know. So it's become, in that sense, very Middle Eastern. Unfortunately. And I say that having lived in the Middle East for many years. So that's a little bit about me. You don't need to know any more than that. I'd like to welcome you all to Istanbul and to the foundation and to this session. And I caught the tail end of Necati Bey's discussion. He was on last, I think. And he was talking about basically representationalism. The world is a representational world. The world is a representational universe because it shows the handiwork of God. So it represents something. Everything we see represents something. And we can read in Quran which it talks about ayat. Ayat, as you know, obviously means verses. It also means signs and symbols, things which point to things other than themselves. We have forgotten that we live in a representational universe. Unfortunately, the West, when I talk about the West, I'm not talking about the geographical West so much as the ideological West, so we can include places which aren't West at all. Most of the English-speaking world, we have North America, of course, we have most of Europe, which is not English-speaking, but it's secular. We have Australia, New Zealand, so I'm not talking, when I say the West, I'm talking about a concept, basically. And the West is where the sun sets, and it's where the sun of deen, the sun of religion or belief, set around 500 years ago. And we're still suffering from the upheavals which those movements and currents and revolutions brought about. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. How did we get into this situation over the past 500 years? And that's relevant to you as educators, I think, because you're educating children who live in that system, who are products of that system. And whether we like it or not, it's like a Chinese water torture, you know, the drip, drip, drip. They lie you on a slab and they drip water onto your forehead. I haven't experienced it, but I can imagine. And it drives you crazy in the end, and you don't realize it because it's so apparently innocuous and simple. There's also the analogy of the boiling frogs. Do you know that analogy? Yeah. So you can't drop a frog into boiling water, but if you put the frog in the water at the beginning and slowly boil, and that's what they've done to us over the past 500 years. They've slowly boiled us, and we don't realize it. And we're splashing about, and people think that we're swimming and enjoying it, but we're not. We're suffering. So I want to go through some of the historical reasons why that happened. Could we go to the first slide, please? Actually, it says slide 2. Can you see the font there? Is it Sorry, I should have done it in a different color. So it's absolutely undoubtable, if we read our history, that prior to the 16th century, we actually lived in a representational universe. It doesn't matter what the faith was, monotheistic faiths, even the non-monotheistic faiths, they understood what transcendence was. Even the animists, the spirit worshippers, what we call the polytheists, they understood what it meant for the universe to be representational. They saw that this world is not all that there is. And the metaphysical structures upon which these beliefs were constructed, and I'm thinking mainly of the three monotheistic faiths. I'm thinking of Christianity, Judaism, and of course Islam, especially Islam. They believed in a universe that was characterized by its createdness. For them, it was just axiomatic. It was normal to think that we live in a created universe. Everything is created and given, right? The universe is limited. The universe is finite. The universe is dependent. These were not even questioned. These were taught and understood, and they were understood by the reason. And also, we have two kinds of reason, ratio and I can't remember the name of the other one, but it means fiqhul qalb. We have our heart reason. The heart is the seat of reason, intuition, and it's timeless and placeless. And the reason that we always locate in the mind, actually it's not located in the mind, is that rational way of linear thinking and problem solving. So we have two kinds of reason. And for people prior to the 15th century, they didn't even question it, because for them it was very, very normal, very reasonable, very rational to believe in a universe that was created, and a universe which actually shows the handiwork of its creator. Just as you, for example, see a painting, and the painting tells you something about the one who painted it, or you read a book, and you can tell, even between the lines, about the author. People believed in a universe that was like this, basically. Universe was a vast book that can be read, or a vast painting that can be understood. And in all three faiths, one could say that the metaphysical underpinnings of these faiths were more or less identical. So if you read theologians from the 13th century, if you read Fakhruddin Razi, for example, or if you read Ghazali, and then if you read Thomas Aquinas, and you read various other theologians from other faiths, you will find commonalities, more commonalities than there are differences. So basically, it was universal vision. Absolutely universal. We don't have that anymore. The world is not seen as being representational anymore. Muslims will try to apply the notion that everything is a sign of God and everything points to Him. And Islam is the most representational of all of the faiths, because it sees everything as signs. It sees the whole universe as the face of Allah, of the Wajhullah. How more representational can you get? But we've lost it. We've lost it, unfortunately. And our kids need to be reacquainted with that. And that's your responsibility as educators. Let's try to conceptualize it a little bit more, how can we say, pictorially. There should be on slide 3, please, Osmar. Okay, there's something I lifted from a book. Copyright. I don't know whether I violated any copyright laws. But this may help us a little bit to conceptualize how these three faiths understood the universe in very broad brush terms. So if you look at the circle there, the circle represents the totality of existence. It's not a globe. It's not supposed to represent the universe. It's supposed to represent existence. So if you look at the outer edge of the circle, the circumference, that's the corporeal world, the world of matter, right? The world of hard wood, of soft flowers, of human bodies, things that can be measured and weighed. And that's what we call, in our tradition, the visible realm, or alam al-shahada, or alam al-mulk. And I'm sure you're all acquainted with these terms. So this is the realm of sensory perception. We can smell it, taste it, touch it, feel it, see it. The point at the center is, maybe we can say it's the locus of the absolute divinity or Godhead. It represents the uluhiyya that we cannot fathom or touch or see or smell. It is God in Himself and of Himself as He is, and that aspect of the divine that we cannot even imagine, the Jalaliya aspect of Allah, if you wish. And it's often called the Dhat, the essence of God, God's essence. In other words, God as He is in and of Himself. And that is transcendent, of course. Because we're human and we're limited, we have to represent these things by, with pictures, and Allah there is represented by a dot, which is timeless and spaceless. So that's the point at the center of the circle. It's sometimes known, this realm is sometimes known as Alam al-Jabarut. In fact, the theologians and the mystics of the medieval period had lots of different schemes. Some of them had 7 levels, some had 5 levels of existence. Said Nursi, of course, who this week is sort of centered in our deliberations and discussions, he basically said there's Mulk and Malakut. He didn't want to make it difficult for his readers or followers. So we can think in terms of Mulk and Malakut, but also don't forget in the center there's Jabarut, or the Godhead in a sense. The space inside the circle, whatever is inside the circle, is Malakut basically. We can call it Alam al-Malakut, Alam al-Qayb al-Nisbi, the relative unseen. And this is the realm in which we find other realms which are almost always hidden to our external senses. So the realm of angels, the realm of the spirit, the realm of the human lata'if. We have inner feelings and inner senses as well as external senses. We have imagination, intuition. It's the realm of the heart. It's the realm of the hereafter, the things that we can't normally see, because they're not material in the sense that we are material. They have a kind of immaterial materiality, to use a paradoxical term. So basically, in this scheme here, we have Mulk, and we have Malakut, and we have Jabarut. So Alam al-Shahada, Alam al-Qayb, Qayb al-Qayb, which is Allah, of course, and Qayb al-Nisbi, which is Malakut. So in turn, this tripartite scheme corresponds to the tripartite nature of the human being. Because we have a body, which corresponds to the outer circle, the circumference of the circle. We have a body. We have a soul, which corresponds to the space inside there, because our soul is stretched between Mulk and Malakut. We all have Malakuti aspects. We all dream. We all have aspirations. We all have love. We all have desires. We all have all of those things which belong to Malakut. And we have a spirit, Ruh, which corresponds with Jabarut, because we don't know anything about our Ruh, very, very little about our Ruh. So now don't worry too much about how these correspond, but be sure that they do correspond. In other words, what I'm trying to say here, and I don't want to get technical, I don't want to turn it into a theology or a philosophy class, I'm not interested in that today. In short, all of the major faiths prior to around the 16th century, they saw the structure of existence in very, very similar ways. They all had this kind of setup. That's how they saw existence. In other words, they saw the universe as representational. They saw the circumference of the circle there representing everything inside of the circle. So everything comes from the inside of the circle, becomes manifest on the circumference, and then looks out as we look out onto the world. But we have an inner life. That circle is inside us, as well as being inside every atom, every aspect of existence. My computer keeps switching off. So basically, the outer represents the inner. The Mulk represents the Malakut. And when we boil down everything that Najati was saying, and the other, was Alparslan here? Alparslan would have said the same. Yunus Çengel would have probably said the same. I would definitely have said the same. The Mulk represents the Malakut. The Mulk is a kind of mirror to the Malakut. And this is why in Quran it says, wherever you look there are ayat, there are signs. Because the external represents the internal. We've forgotten this. We know it conceptually. You know, it's part of our aqidah. We can repeat the aqidah quite easily. But do we actually implement this? Do we actually carry this along with us? when we're talking to other people, when we're talking to our kids, when we're teaching. I don't. I try, but I'm very, very rarely successful, because it's not easy, because we've forgotten it. We know how to do it. You know, our qalb knows how to do it, but we've lost the practice, and we've been indoctrinated by educationalists, not you, but we've been indoctrinated by educationalists to think only in a linear way. So A plus B equals this, and when I walk I go forward, and I think backward and I think forward, and it's always linear. We never look up conceptually, right? Because creation is top down. Creation is not A, B, A, B. It's not cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect. We have that idea of cause and effect. We work with cause and effect, but actually, every effect is actually created directly by Allah, and we forget this, but we'll get to that later. So, what does this mean in reality? It means that God is reflected in the creation. God's creation is a reflection or a manifestation of His names. We can't say it's a manifestation of His essence. How could we say that? We don't know what His essence is, and we can never know. But what we can know is His names, because He tells us His names. We experience His names all the time. We have samples of His names in us, reflected in us. Allah is sabur, and I always want more of sabr, and I say, please God, give me sabr, give it now, right? Impatient. But lots of people here, I've noticed over the last couple of days, are extremely patient. You know, when things go wrong, when air conditioners suddenly start, you know, spurting water all over the place, no one runs and screams and goes, you know, oh, what's happening? Calm, patience. So we have the names. We experience the names. They're experiential. Mothers, for example, it's a bit of a cliche, but mothers manifest compassion more than fathers, I have to say. Fathers may manifest sultana, you know, the sultan. But mothers, who are actually the real sultanas, you know, in the family, they manifest compassion. Where does compassion from? You know, you were a sperm and an egg. That they don't have compassion. So where did it come from? So we manifest the names. We know what the names are. We live with the names. We work with them. Unfortunately, we also pretend that they're ours, and that's the problem. So, where are we? Yes. So the universe is a representation of God. It's like a book that represents its author. It's like a painting that represents its painter. And stuck in the middle, of course, strung between Mulk and Malakut, is human being. And human being has a task, and the task of the human being is to find out who he or she is. And I don't want to keep saying he or she. Do you mind if I just say he? Okay. Do you want me to just say she? Humankind. It's a problem when you're translating stuff and you want to write, you know, he or she. Especially Nursi, of course, he lived in a intensely patriarchal society, and that's not a problem. I don't have a problem with patriarchy. But in this modern age, people like representation, which is the bane of my life. EDI, what's the equality, diversity, and inclusion, which is now. Do you all deal with this? EDI, yes. Anyway, I'm going to say he. So God is reflected in creation. Humankind is in the middle, and we are tasked with a search for meaning. All our life is about searching for meaning. Even if you don't believe in God, you're still searching for meaning. Everyone is searching for meaning. And we're created with the ability to read the creation. Children are amazing at this. They accept so easily, and they don't accept rubbish from parents. When you tell the child that, look at the tree is created generously and mercifully, they're not going to dispute you. Not when they're young anyway, not unless they've been to state school and they've been out of your grasp. Then they'll say, it's just a tree, Baba. That's all it is. Why are you telling me? It's like, what's it a reflection of, you know? It's just a tree. That's where it starts. That's where the rot sets in. So our task is to read the creation and read it well and try to understand it, right? Everyone reads the creation and comes to a conclusion. Even if that conclusion is, the creation, what creation? It's not created. It's a conclusion. They've read, they've misread, and they've interpreted. Everyone does it. We read all the time. So the whole narrative that's unfolding here is a paradigm, basically. It's a paradigmatic narrative of what is the modern world. The modern world has become unrepresentational, if that's a word. In other words, modern man doesn't see the world as being representational of something other than itself. They still try to find meaning and representationality, but they do it horizontally. Oh, I had a dream about gold. I'm going to become rich, and so they do make these representational jumps, but it's all horizontal. It's never vertical. So prior to the 17th century, as I said, most of what I've just tried to explain would have been understood very, very, I mean, you understand it because you're different, I'm assuming. But back in the 16th century, if I'd talked on the level of a farmer or a farmhand or a farm labourer, and most of my ancestors were farm labourers, so let's imagine like great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. If I'd simplified it and boiled it down, he would have understood. He would have said, yeah, what you're saying is everything's created by God, and wherever we look, we can see God's handiwork. No one would have misunderstood. Very few people. I mean, there's always one, isn't there? So maybe you would have found some dissenters, but it would have been very rare. I think we can maybe move on to the next one. Oh, actually, no, sorry. Can we? Is this 3? Yeah, it is. Right. Okay, so yeah, we can finish with this now. What I wanted to say at the end of this, if you can go on to 4, is that everything changes. Is it not changing? Ah, there we are. Good. So in the 16th century, everything changes. But before we talk about what happens in Europe, I want to have a quick look at Islam. So of all of the faiths that I've talked about, in the context of representationality, Islam is the soundest, the fullest, the most complete, and of course it's perfect in that sense. Islam is 100% a representational faith because it sees every atom as being a manifestation of its creator. And the word ayah and ayat are evidence of this. And there are 350 plus references to the word ayah or ayat, in singular and plural. And we can see them in various different surahs of the Quran. And here there's from Surah Rahman, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. You know this verse. The signs are also bounties. Bounties are signs and signs are bounties. Rahman, Surah Rahman, is perhaps the greatest witness to this. Everything is a sign and every sign is a bounty. Every bounty is also a sign. So the signs are everywhere. It's clear from the verses. It's also corroborated by verses such as 40:81. He shows you his signs. So which of the signs of Allah do you deny? So we can understand by that word denial there, inkar, the Quran means not only denial of the signs themselves, and this is really important, it's not just the signs which are denied, it's the representationality of the signs. So even skeptics, agnostics, non-Muslims can believe in God, but there's no link between God and creation for them, actually. Because when they look at a cherry tree, they see a cherry tree. They don't see a manifestation of divine names. So the denial that I understand from this is not just denying the signs, but denying the fact that there is such a thing as a sign. So they're not denying that these things exist, but what they're saying is they're not signs. They're saying the cherry tree exists, we don't deny the cherry tree, but it's not a sign of anything.
Is this materialism?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Spot on. I've just lost. Right. Okay, back. So there also we see that Wajhullah, everywhere you look, there is the face of God. What does that mean? Theologians argued so much over this. And I don't want to get into the arguments about anthropomorphism and God having hands and face, and why do we say that? Because these are bodily things. You know, Quran is talking to us on our level, lowest common denominator level. And your face is how you're identified, right? You have an ID card, it has a photograph on. Yeah? It doesn't have a nice picture of a rose on it, has your face on it. Yeah? Because, or when you come to Tehran, I keep calling this Tehran. Istanbul. I used to live in Tehran, sorry. I come to Istanbul, and I keep calling it Tehran. Several times yesterday I said, Tehran's so wonderful. Sorry?
Yesterday you told as well Iran.
Did I? Yeah, sorry. No, Istanbul. What was I saying? Yes, when you come to Istanbul airport, they take a photograph of you. Because your face identifies you. Allah's face is the creation. In other words, the creation identifies him. Yeah? So Quran is full of representationality. We know also that in our spiritual traditions, you know, such as in the tradition of Tasawwuf, and if you've heard that Sayyid Nursi was a Sufi, he wasn't. Just to knock that on the head. Because sometimes we start talking about manifestation and creation being a mirror or a book, and they say, "Ah, you're Sufi." No, 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 no. These things are very Quranic. Very Quranic. Tasawwuf is fine, but he wasn't. It's just a technical... I just wanted to disabuse you of the fact that he was a Sufi. We know in the Sufi tradition that, you know, manifestation is very big. Tajalliyat. The world is a mirror, the world is a tree, the world is a book, all of these things. These are all representationality signs. Yeah? Some people say Wajhullah, others say like the world is like a book, the world is like a mirror which reflects God's face, God's attributes, God's names. So all of these things. And of course we have here at the bottom of this slide, and you'll be pleased to know there are only 8 slides, but very long ones. You'll be pleased to see at the bottom of this that we have Adam alayhi salam, who was taught all of the names. What does that mean, to be taught all of the names? I'll have a little break after this actually, so you can get a breather, and I can get a breather. What does it mean to teach Adam the names? Adam was taught all of the names. Adam, who is Adam? Adam alayhi salam, but we are all Adam, right? We're all Adam, and we're all taught the names. We're all taught the names. And some will say, what does it mean teaching the names? Like, that's a tree, that's a bear, that's a river, that's the sky. Okay, but teaching us the names is teaching us God's names. As you teach God's names to your kids, you know, be patient, show patience, be merciful. You know, this is teaching the names. And the names were taught to us, and so we all have these names, samples of them, reflections of them. We represent the names. We represent Allah. We are Khalifatullah. Khalifatullah. I remember once talking to someone, I said, let's talk a bit about being Khalifatullah. He said, Akhid, no more caliphate anymore. Caliphate's finished. So no, it hasn't finished. Maybe that one finished. But our caliphate hasn't finished. Maybe it hasn't even started. There's lots. I've got lots of verses here which corroborate all of this. But I'm going to stop there. Can we have, Sister Uzma, can we have 5 minutes?
And the issue of soul and the spirit, for me, seems the same thing.
You're not a layman, though, are you?
You know.
You're not a layman, really. There are lots of our scholars who conflate the two. And I've come across it lots. They say soul or spirit. No, they're different. Quran makes a very, very clear differentiation between soul and spirit. Soul is nafs. And nafs has compartments. We know a lot about nafs. Ghazali has lots of chapters about the amradul nafs, the diseases of the soul and how to remedy them. Nafs is part mulki, part malakuti. Ruh is completely malakuti. Ruh is timeless, placeless. I can't say more about ruh. You know, ruh is what animates us, what connects us to our creator. Nafs is different. We have ananiya, we have, not ego, I don't like the word ego, we have I-ness, right? Fir'auniya, we can become Fir'aun or we can become Musa alayhi salam. Like Musa alayhi salam. So that's the nafs. But the ruh is the connecting light, if you wish. I mean, how can we describe it? So it's very different. Yeah. English language doesn't bear the weight of Quranic truths. No other language does apart from Arabic. Quranic maybe. Quranic Arabic. So yeah, it's a slight digression, but I appreciate it because it might have been a sticking point for someone. Anyone else have any questions? Yes.
So for the nafs, we know the Quranic verses that mention the nafs. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. What about the spirit? Which verses could we use as examples that mention the ruh?
I can't remember the exact verse, but it says that of the spirit you know but very little. Yes.
Oh.
I'm glad that we have lots of hafizes in the room. That's great. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's the nafakhtu, you know, where ruh comes from the same word that means wind or breeze. And nafs does as well, actually, because tanaffus is to breathe.
Okay, and we have the body, we all know the body.
Yeah.
And what about the heart? إنها لا تعمل الأبصار ولكن تعمل القلوب التي في الصدور. So where's the heart here in these three?
The heart is also malakuti. It's represented by a heart of flesh. But these are all representations. What is your actual physical heart? It's not there.
So the heart is different than
the heart
nafs?
Is, yes. Well, I can't say yes. I can't say yes because I don't know.
Is it part of it?
Does it matter? It's different, but does it matter where it is or what it is or how it's... We have qalb, we know that the qalb is something that is not material. Yeah?
Yes.
So it's part of malakut.
Yes.
We have malakuti aspects to us, and that's one of them. Where is it? How does it function? Allah.
I'm asking this because when we address the issue with our students, for example, nafs, we talked about nafs, there's nafs al-mutma'inna, nafs al-lawama, and so on. And we talk about amrad al-qulub, things that they need to do tazkiyah to get rid of.
Yes.
So how do these cross the ways? How can we differentiate between the two?
It's hard. It would take another session on that, and I'm not prepared for that now. Really.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. It's okay.
It's a bit of a digression, but it's a very interesting one.
Hocam, nasıl ustaz used to say, like, qalb and ruh is against nafs, which is in the amara level. So even he says, listen to your heart, qalb, and ruh, not your nafs.
How I see it, basically, and it may be completely wrong, but how I see it is that there is the qalb, and we have to do it sort of pictorially or physically, but you know it's not physical. You have the ruh, which is in a kind of a protective cover, but you can see through it, transparent, and covering that. The ruh with the qalb, and covering that is the nafs. Now, if the nafs becomes, and the nafs can also be cleansed, but if it's not, then what it does, it chokes the ruh, actually, and the qalb. So it's the nafs which... And again, I don't want this to digress into a discussion of nafs, but yeah, it's difficult to represent it in a way that can be easily understood. Anything about anything that's been said in the past 4 slides? No? So shall we carry on? Okay.
I think the focus, the concluding part is the focus, that how do we get to this point of Khalifa.
You've read the concluding part already.
No, the last sentence here.
Oh, here, right, okay,
yeah.
yes. Okay.
Because we often talk about this in schools.
Yeah.
Schools will often talk about telling the children that you are a Khalifa and you are responsible. And then lots of activities take place. And then what happens is that any discipline or anything that you want the child to do is not achieved. Even though you've told them you are a Khalifa, but they don't act like it. And most of the problems in schools are behavioral. So the missing point, this is the missing point, that in order to understand you're a Khalifa, you have to understand everything before that.
Yes, but I don't think a child, with respect, is going to be able to understand the minutiae and intricacies of the position, the physiological spirituality, qalb and nafs and all of these things, and I think it would be counterproductive.
So what we need to do here, what the educators need to do, is see how this knowledge is going to translate in their particular settings. How are we going to use this concept, how are we going to break it down and simplify it to make that link?
I think that's it's a whole other issue, how to do it. It's a procedural issue. First, we need to understand why we're suffering, I think. We need to understand the historical antecedents of why we have a problem. Otherwise, we repeat the problems of the past. I mean, I'm not an educator. I mean, I have been, but I'm not an educator of small children.
Well, I have tried this link with my daughter when I was homeschooling her. We started from the idea of the plant and how you plant and what does the plant need to grow. And then we linked it to the ruh and the jasad. And the nafs is the combination of both, ruh plus jasad. So same way we need food, water, and what else to grow physically, we need things to grow spiritually also.
But that's easy to tell a child, surely. You say to the child, look, you have desires and wants, you have love, you have all of these things, all of these qualities. They come from your ruh. And sometimes you want to throw a stone through the next door neighbor's window. That comes from your nafs, okay? You have a ruh, you have a nafs, tamam. What else? Simplify it. We have to be, let's not overthink. Yeah? Small kids accept that. And then you reinforce it. I'm telling you to do all the things that I probably never did with my own kids. Unfortunately.
But also it says in the Quran, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا.
Absolutely.
So there's so much we don't know about the ruh.
And can't know. We can't know.
Exactly.
So the kid says, what's my spirit? And so you may not know what your spirit is, but you know that you have one. Do you really know what dreams are? But you have them, right? That's enough. I know that you dream, you know that I dream. I can't prove to you that I dream, but you know that I dream because you dream, right? Tamam, you don't need to actually have a dream, what is the dream, where does the dream reside? The kid doesn't want to know that. The kid wants to know, what is it in me that's propelling me to do good things? What is it in me that's propelling me to do bad things, okay? Don't do this, do that. Kids accept that. And then you can build on that as the kid gets older.
There is a simple connection. It's the nafs most likely connected with the body.
Yes.
So nafs al-ammara, is the execution one. And the ruh is the one that connected. Like when you die, it's spiritual more than physical. So that's a simple connection. Like when you die, your soul, ruh goes up. And in the Quran and the Sunnah, actually, they are interchanged many times. In the Hadith, and they are interchanged. But the old scholar and the Sahaba, they understood it without even to have someone to explain it to them. Subhanallah. But that's how I look at it, as a physical and a spiritual. And nafs is a physical one connected to your body, and the ruh is more spiritual one connected to Allah.
I think the ruh is completely spiritual. Nafs is inclined to the earth. There's a verse in Quran which talks about ikhlad bil ard. Don't incline to the earth. We shouldn't incline to the earth. The nafs inclines to the earth. The nafs wants to be lazy. The nafs doesn't want to come and teach here at 11:30, which is early for me on a Wednesday, right? Doesn't want to. So we're inclined to laziness. We're inclined to not wanting to bother. Even when we make tawakkul, it's lazy tawakkul. Oh, Allah wanted this to happen. But this is what we are. We're lazy, and that's from the nafs. But ruh is different. Can we move to? Oh, we're on 5. Okay. Okay, so it's we don't have that much time, and I can't really take you through every step of what happened in the West, right? In the Judeo-Christian West. So we've dealt with Islam in theory. Islam, we know, is a representational deen. It's not a religion, it's not a way of life, it's the way of life, it's the way of the universe. But what happened in the West to cause all of these problems, and of course those problems now are seeping into the Muslim, or have seeped into the Muslim world. So a radical change occurred, and you can't pinpoint it to a year because it was gradual, it was incremental, and there was a shift from a representational universe in which everyone felt connected to the universe. They felt at one with it. In a sense, oh, what's happened here? Tubano, you know computers. What have I done?
What have you done? Slide 5.
Oh no, no, it's the rest of it's black. It's okay. Yeah, fine, thanks. When you have a baby, the ladies who have babies will know, when they're a few days old and they look up at you, they don't know that they're separate from you. They think that you are part of them. They see you, they see unity, they see themselves at one with you. They have no idea. It's only around 5 or 6 months that they start looking at their hand and realizing that they're separate, right? So prior to the 16th century, human beings were more or less like that. They'd look at the creation and they would feel at one with the creation, part of it. They understood it. They were able to commune with it. They could interpret it. So there was a gradual change of consciousness, and that begins with the Renaissance. And then we have the voyages of discovery, when the maritime nations from Western Europe start traveling around the world and start colonizing and conquering. And shortly after that, we have the so-called scientific revolution. We have developments in astronomy and physics. We can talk about people like Copernicus, we can talk about Galileo, we can talk about Isaac Newton. And later we have philosophers such as Descartes. And all of these sort of gang up on reality, in a sense. Not literally, obviously. But it so happens that this change of consciousness is absolutely anti-representational. And they effect a kind of revolution in the physical sciences which deals a blow to the idea that the universe is a representation. Now, it's not our point, it's not our place here to look at the detail of these revolutions. All we need to say that, for example, with Copernicus and Galileo, the Earth loses its special position. The Earth was seen as the center of divine attention. And with Galileo and Copernicus and the sort of revolutions that take place in astronomy, the Earth loses its special place. The Earth is no longer special. The Earth is seen as just a tiny dot in some far-off galaxy with no importance, no centrality, not special at all. And you can understand why that is problematic. Because if we think that the Earth is central, then we know that Allah has a special attention towards us, has special favors towards us. So this special position that the Earth had, is thrown out. And it wasn't because of any kind of scientific realization, it was because of philosophical and ideological changes. Astronomy is, strictly speaking, observational, it's not scientific. That's another issue. So instead of being the center of divine attention, the Earth just becomes a tiny dot in the distant reaches of some galaxy somewhere. Also, more importantly, the Copernican revolution reduces the universe to something which can be measured. And that becomes its most important feature. We can measure the universe. So when that happens, actually, the universe becomes much, much smaller. In fact, even though they say the universe is infinite, it becomes much, much smaller because they're not actually bothered with the material reality of the universe. They're only bothered with what can be measured and weighed. In other words, numbers. So maths in English, but math for North Americans. Do Canadians say math or maths? Math. Okay. Okay, math. So the universe becomes mathematicized.
Size.
Nothing. Yes, that. Right. Yeah. That's what the universe becomes. It becomes something to measure. Something to measure, something to weigh. And as we'll see with Descartes, that's the only important thing there is measuring and weighing. Value goes out of the window. So that's the Copernican revolution. The revolution under Newton, he geometrizes the universe. The universe becomes a mechanism. So the universe becomes a mechanical universe under Newton. So this is the first nail in the coffin of the representational universe. With the astronomers, they see the universe as something which is measurable, and it's only the measurements which are important. Newton mechanizes the universe. He sees the universe, even though he was a believer, he saw the universe as this vast mechanism. God starts off the mechanism, and then the mechanism carries on by itself. So Newton, in effect, turns the whole universe into a machine. So this mechanistic idea of measuring and weighing and computing starts off with these guys in the 16th and 17th century. And when you actually focus just on measuring and on geometry and on maths, then the universe is no longer the universe it was. The universe starts to become distant. Because when you study something, you have to have it at arm's length, right? So when the universe began to be studied scientifically, they had to separate it from themselves. They started to see themselves as separate. Now we're moving from the time of my great-great-great-great-grandfather, who saw everything as God's handiwork and saw himself as one with the universe. Gradually, in the 16th and 17th century, that universe starts to become distant. Why? Because it's seen as an object, as a separate object. And we are still living in that universe today. The universe is seen as something separate, not as something immediate, not as something close, not as something familiar. It's seen as something distant, which is why you will pass the cherry tree and you will say, look, the cherry tree is a reflection of God's generosity. You'll say, mashallah. A scientist will see just wood and leaves that don't represent anything except themselves. So this is what happened. If we can go to 6.
Maybe ask questions in between, or?
If anyone has questions in between. Yes.
It seems this phenomena starts in this century, right? What is the background?
Microphone, please.
Right. So this phenomena starts in these centuries, right, with Newton and all of that. What is the background for that to happen?
It's an interesting question. I think the background is Aristotelian logic. Aristotle, I don't want to go back into Greek philosophy because I don't have the expertise. But Plato and Aristotle, it was Aristotle that won the battle between the philosophers, basically. Plato had an idea of transcendence. Plato's God was a God outside of the creation. Aristotle's God was the God in the creation. So when you see just horizontally, and when the God that you're talking about is actually not separate from the creation, then there are problems. Because God becomes limited. And ultimately becomes an object, just as much of an object as the universe is. And becomes subsumed by the universe in a sense. That's the short answer. Not very convincing by the look. You look as though
Why did it happen at that point?
I don't. It had to happen, actually.
I understand. No, I mean, is there things where they look at religion as Christianity, and the people who are the thinkers were like, okay, there's something not right, and then we need to go seek.
Yes.
That's the background.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can say that it started maybe even in the 12th century among Christian theologians, and especially the issue of Aristotle, and then incrementally, very, very slowly over the years. But then suddenly, it just exploded. Why did it explode in the 16th century? I don't know. I mean, we can see the whole of human civilization like a human life, with babyhood and then childhood and then adolescence and then adulthood. Maybe this is the same. At some point, the adolescent is going to start rebelling. So maybe the 16th century is the adolescence of Western civilization.
Sorry, I don't mean to continue, but the reason I'm asking that is, if you look at, the golden age of Islam, right, and then the sciences were developed, and a lot of that was used as a foundation for the sciences to come later.
Yeah.
So when they had that knowledge to go off in a complete different dimension here, that's the question. That's the reason I'm asking this.
Why did it happen?
Why did it happen? Because they were, I mean, if you look at a lot of the sciences today, the basis of that was the Islamic sciences that were developed in 1180, right? Those, and then using that information, right? But then completely going off in a different dimension when it comes to the source.
But you could also say, by the same virtue, that when the translation movement happened, and when the Arabic translations of Greek and Hellenistic philosophy were produced, it was mostly Aristotle that they were translating. And we see this in the works of our philosophers, Ibn Rushd, for example. We see this Aristotelian logic, and that is also damaging. It's damaging in a very slow burn way, right? The burn is slow and it takes centuries for it to become manifest. So I'm not saying that's the answer, but I mean it's incremental, and it has to happen, actually. Such as Adam has to fall. Why did Adam fall at that point? Did Adam jump or was he pushed? Yeah, you can ask that question. Maybe both. Yeah. Why do we fall as human beings? Why does a child at the age of 2 go crazy? They say terrible twos, right? My son has a 2-year-old, and I can't even describe the craziness of a 2-year-old. I'm sure people in this room understand. Why then? Why at 2? Why and then maybe it happens again at 14 and 15. I know it happens again. Why at those ages? There's a reason for it. It may be incremental bad education. I don't know. Why do adolescents go off the rails at the age of 14?
I was just thinking maybe there was an historical content to it with what's happening in Europe at that time. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, arrogance maybe. I mean, the voyages of discovery, they weren't pleasure trips, were they? They were killing missions, basically. Looting missions. So that seeps into consciousness as well. We can rule the world, If you live in Britain, it's Great Britain. Why is it called Great Britain? Actually, it's a geographical term, Great Britain. But people don't understand it as being geographical. They understand it that Britain was great. Why? Because they said the sun never sets on the British Empire, because most of the map was red. Now, when you have that consciousness, that arrogance seeps over into other things. So there's so many factors as to why these things happen at certain times.
But the bigger question is...
Sorry, Harry.
But the bigger question is not that they've gone into atheism, but why did a Christian civilization not morph into an Islamic civilization? I think living in the West, right, that is a question that I grapple with. Why don't they become Muslims, lock, stock and barrel?
It's not time yet, but they will.
When we consider ourselves to be Christians +1 in a metaphorical sense or in the biblical sense, why did they go to atheism, and why didn't they go to their natural home when they could have gone into Islam?
But you can say also, why doesn't the Muslim world become truly mu'min? Same problem, yeah? Would we have the problems we have? Would we have the problems we have if the Muslim world was truly mu'min? The world wouldn't be as it is today, right?
Here is some examples who start to say, if we show the akhlaq of us, all the earth would be Muslim.
Of course, yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, of course. Of course. It will happen, it's not time yet.
Yeah, there are a lot of lost Muslims out there, aren't they?
Yeah.
But the question I wanted to ask is, you said that after the 16th century approximately, when people started measuring and studying the universe, and they separated themselves from the world or the universe itself.
Yeah, now I forgot my question.
I like those kinds of
because it just took too long for me to ask it.
I think, although I don't really set much store by the voyages of discovery theory, I think the voyages of discovery, when you go off and start conquering new lands, right? When you go and conquer the so-called New World, which wasn't new at all, it had been there for a very long time, and it had its own civilization. When you start doing that, you feel superior. And if you feel superior, why do you have to obey the priest?
Actually, the question got back to me now. Can I ask it quickly?
Sure.
So the thing is, so when they separate, when they started separating themselves and studying the universe, as you said earlier, so looking at the present now, we've got this movement of mindfulness, being in the present, searching for meaning, and all of that, which is like very much at the forefront at the moment. Lots of books, lots of like literature going on in that area. What's your take on that? Do you think that people are going back to being one with the universe, or trying to be back one with the universe, or is it something completely different? What do you think?
It's a great question. I think people are basically good, deep down. People are basically decent. People are looking for truth. Everyone has an iman, even if it's the iman in non-belief. So people are looking for meaning all the time. With the mindfulness thing, I haven't read any books on mindfulness, but I know what they'll be like. All of the self-help books are the same. The self-help books also believe in the divine names, but they don't say that they're divine. They say that they're perfections, and they say that we have those perfections and we need to develop them. And that is the first mistake, because you're trying to develop something you don't have, right?
So, Hocam, isn't like accepting the concept of God but denying Allah?
They accept the concept of the
names
divine
and attributions naturally.
Allah says we will worship Him taw'an wa karhan, right?
Yeah, now, yes.
And so the unbelievers have their own God. They just call it something different. The unbelievers have a fiqh. They have bureaucracy, they have the state regulations, they have all of these things.
But like the human fitra is going to the truth.
Yes.
Even they don't name it like Allah, but in any way they are accepting concept of Allah by, giving all the names and attributions to the nature causes this and that, whatever it is. But actually, as the conceptual basis, they're accepting God, I think.
The thing is, right, they're looking basically for Allah, right? They know the divine names, but what's happened is the cord, right, or the rope, because they're hablul matin even, the rope between creation and the creator has been cut, right? The rope falls back down onto the things themselves. Mm-hmm. So when they look for meaning, they look for meaning in the things.
Yeah.
In other words, they look horizontally, they look in a linear sense, they don't look upwards. And I don't mean physical upwards, conceptually upwards. So it's as though they built a ceiling, right? And the truth is on the other side, and they want the truth, and they go up and they keep hitting their head. Mm-hmm. And falling back down. Mm-hmm. And the mindfulness thing will collapse eventually as well.
And maybe going to that question the brother asked, in the first time in this Enlightenment era, why people tended to deny God. Actually, as you said, like arrogance, egoism or ananiya, which is the best and first and foremost explanation for that. But historically...
How do I stop this? Sorry, I'll turn it off.
But historically speaking, actually it starts firstly with denial of Bible and revelation. And I think personally, I'm thinking, if you deny the revelation and tradition that you had, which is the noble or which is the most holy thing for you, you can deny everything else. And then you can find a very good opportunity to claim yourself as God. Because what else left?
One of the problems, and it's a problem that the priests and the scholars tried to stop, was the translation of the Bible into English. Because when the Bible, they martyred the guy who translated. So you can tell translators always have problems. They really do have problems.
Yes, it's
I went for this is a real story. I lived in Iran for 4 or 5 years, a long time ago, before all of this rubbish that happened. And I went for a job at the British Embassy as a translator, and I said, because I normally say, why did the previous translator leave? And apparently he was shot. And then, so I thought, right, not really the place I want to work. I went to the American Embassy, and I said, there was a job for a translator, and I said, why did the previous translator leave? And he hanged himself. So, you know, translation is a bit of a problem. And when the Bible was translated, ordinary people started to read the Bible, and they said, because some of the priests, like some of our imams, are corrupt and have no idea what they're talking about, and the ordinary people reading the Bible in English for the first time thought, well, my heavens above, you know, this guy is talking a load of rubbish. You know, the local priest. It doesn't say that in the Bible, and therefore authority becomes questioned. And when you start questioning authority, you have a problem. And then add to that, at the same time, you've got the Renaissance, going back to Greek philosophy. Art changes, art becomes, art has perspective. Before the 16th century, when you looked at a picture, there was no perspective. So you'd have like 10 people standing behind each other, there was this person there, and then stuck next to them, there would be that person, and then that person. No perspective. Why? Because artists saw themselves as being close to the creation. It's amazing. After the 16th century, before as well, I mean, dribs and drabs, art has perspective. In other words, when you see a building far away, in the picture it looks far away. Why? Because the creation has become far away and it's become separate. So all of these things are happening together. Yes, Uzma.
I just want to add another perspective on this one. That, is it possible that it was a power thing as well? It's not
a what?
Power struggle.
Power struggle.
It's not that people want the truth. I mean, if people are studying Islamic civilization, all those people who translated even Quran and Sirah, the German translators and the French, why didn't they see the truth of Islam? Because it's to do with power. They wanted to have domination of the world. So part of it is that the truth was covered up. The truth of Islam as the final deen and revelation was covered up for power, like it is today.
Knowledge is power, right? And I know scholars, I know Christian scholars and non-Christian scholars who know our fiqh better than we do. Because in order to control, you have to know. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Right. If we can, is this the one we're on at the moment? 7. Yeah, Descartes. Right. Let's try and wind this up. How much time do we have?
1 o'clock.
Okay. Hopefully we can finish by then. So with Descartes, the process reaches a kind of high point. You know Descartes, I think, therefore I am. He famously claimed that there are 2 kinds of things in the universe. Things that you can measure and explain with math, with theories, with predictions, and things which can only be imagined. Right? In other words, whatever can't be measured is basically a subjective product of the human mind. So colors, smells, sensations, feelings, values, attributes, love, justice, imagination, intuition. He said all of these things are subjective and they're meaningless ultimately. The only things which are interesting and studyable and meaningful are the things which can be measured. He doesn't mean material things which can be measured. The measurements of those things are important. If you can measure it, velocity, speed, is that the same thing? Speed and velocity? I don't know.
Velocity and direction, speed.
Oh, thanks. Weight, temperature, all of these things, they are the only things for Descartes which are important. And he divided them into 2, and there are 2 Latin terms there, and I'm not going to bore you with those. But things which can be measured, things which have extension, in other words. Things which are extended, in other words, material things, which can be measured and which can be understood scientifically and mathematically. So the second kind are the kind of things that are just products of the subjective mind. Now, what happens? What happens as a result of this? This causes an absolute revolution. All of these things I mentioned. Voyages of discovery, Renaissance, Newton, Copernicus, Galileo, and then we have Descartes. And what happens is there is a split between that outer circumference. That outer circumference breaks away, and all you have is the corporeal world. The world that can be measured and quantified. So it's all about measuring and quantifying. There is a split between the physical, corporeal, sensible world, the world that you can touch and feel, and everything else. So values are not important anymore. Because what's love? You can't measure love. What's desire? You can't quantify desire. You can say I have a lot of desire. Yeah. Can you plot it on a graph? It's a crazy thing. But the thing is, our world is mostly that. Our world is mostly the world of emotions and feelings, and these are very real. They have a very real existence. You know, Malakut is very real for us. It's our universe. It's part of our universe. But for the materialists have a very, very tiny universe. It's a tiny little crust on the top there, that circumference. That's all they have. It's the world of, they call it matter in motion. And they can quantify it, and they can geometrize it and mathematicize it, and they can do all of those things. But yet, in fact, it's an absolute paradox, because their lives outside of the laboratory are lives of feeling, lives of love, they feel, they have emotions, all of those things. But they deny them. They say these things are just products of the imagination. Your God is the most figment of the imagination. You know, God is, we create God in our image, that's what they say. So how can we deal with this world now that it has been quantified and mathematicized and technified and geometrized? And this is the world our children are being brought up in. And I think that we have to know this background. We have to know why this is happening. Maybe not exactly when it happened, or not exactly how it happened, but the fact that it happened. So that our kids know that there is a background to this. Kids want to know where they're from, right? Maybe not when they're very young. They don't ask you to write a family tree when they're very young. When you get older, like me, you want to know who your parents were and your parents' parents, and you want to know where you came from. We want to know how we got here. How did the Muslim world get here? Because we take wholesale everything that the Western world produces, or we have done up until now. Look how fetishized we are by science. We have a fetish for science and technology. Now, I'm not saying science is bad. Of course, science is not bad. But the scientific community today is not scientific. It's pseudo-scientific. And we buy it. We buy it wholesale. Said Nursi said, the West, there are two kinds of Europe. There is the Europe that I've been discussing, and then there is the Europe that can quite easily become Muslim tomorrow. Because they have the antecedents of it. They have the Judeo-Christian substructure to their ideology, to their epistemology, to their ontology. They are Muslims in waiting, in other words. They're Muslims who don't know yet that they're Muslims. And he said, but the other Europe, we have to discern. We have to make a choice. You don't just take the whole package, and that's what we've done. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to get through the last two slides. So basically with Descartes, the idea of the universe as a unity begins to fade. And so here you can see there are two kinds of being. I've already mentioned that. The beings that can be measured and quantified. And then there are values which can't be quantified and therefore for him don't exist. And this whole idea of I think therefore I am, which is quite convoluted, because he had doubts that he existed once he put forward this thesis that only the quantifiable things can be, things that can be measured, they are the only things that are important. And he started to doubt that he existed, which of course you would. So there is a split between the corporeal world and the non-corporeal world. If we can go to number 7, because we need time for a few questions. So the universe suddenly becomes emptied of value. You know, materialists will say, we live in an infinite universe, but their universe is tiny. It's a little prison. It's a little material prison that you can measure and quantify forever and ever, and you can discover new things all the time, but you're not getting bigger. The universe isn't getting bigger because you discover things, more and more things. It's actually getting smaller and smaller because you're never ever reaching the end. Because you're quantifying and you're theorizing and you're geometrizing and you're not reaching a solution. You're not reaching the end. You're searching for meaning, but you're looking for the infinite in the finite. Our kids have to realize this, right? Our kids have to realize what's happened. I'm not talking about small kids. I don't know what ages of kids you teach. But if you're teaching teenagers, maybe it's even too late then. But inshallah, we shouldn't be despairing. We have to teach them why this happened, so that they can fight against it. And when it's suggested to them that, you know, this is all there is, the world is all that there is, material is all that there is, then they know how to, they can challenge it, they know they have the antidote to it. So after the scientific revolution, creation is seen not as pointing to anything other than itself. It's seen as self-sufficient, and it's seen as referring to itself. It doesn't point to God any longer. But very cleverly, they don't get rid of God. You know, Nietzsche said God is dead. But Nietzsche's the one who's dead now, right? So the point is, they didn't kill God. They just took him off the throne, and they put human reason onto the throne instead. God, sorry?
For example?
Well, to an extent, of course. And God is useful, because God can control people. That's what they think God is for. God is a social control mechanism and can keep people in their place. So God was very useful for the materialists. But what they did, which was clever, was they cut the cord between creation and the creator, so that we never think of the creation as being representational. That was their masterpiece, their masterstroke. You know, not allowing God to go because God has his uses, but God is not the center of anything anymore.
We pull him out when we need him.
Yeah, exactly. We pull him out 5 times a day when we, and once on Friday, and that's it. That's so cynical.
Assalamu alaikum. I think another reason why they did that is because the human being has been created with an innate thing inside where he needs to look up to a higher power. And that's why through history, if we go by history, even before people in the community know about God and religion, you'll find people worshipping stones, worshipping all kinds of things. So there's an inherent thing within us that needs to look up to something, and they've conveniently replaced with materialism as the thing to look up to. I think that's why they didn't completely do away with that. I mean, that's what I think.
Absolutely. But even going back to the worshipping of stones, it wasn't the stones that they were worshipping. They were seeing the stones as being representative of. So even they thought, even the what we call the mushrikeen, right? They had a representational universe. We can't even manage that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If we can go on to 8, which is the final one. So have we lost our way? Actually, this is quite important here, because I think here there are problems, you know, in the Muslim world. What are the problems there? There are 4 problems as I see it. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu aminu billah, right? Oh, you who believe in Allah, believe. What does that mean? If you're a believer, why are you being taught to believe? Because belief is dynamic. We've lost that idea, right? So the search for meaning and affirmation needs to be constant. The signs of God, we know that they're being revealed all the time. The Quran is being revealed to us all the time, right? Every day you pick up the Quran and read it, it's being revealed freshly to you at that moment. We've forgotten the immediacy of revelation. We think revelation happened 1,400 years ago and that was it. No, revelation is happening all the time. Allah's signs are being rehearsed to you in the creation all the time. Our kids have to know that. We've lost sight of that. The second, and I'm rushing through these now, is we've objectified and externalized our deen, right? The process that we've come to think is that Islam is the important thing. Iman, we take Iman for granted, and we have to focus on the externals of our faith. Now, I'm not saying that the externals are wrong, because the externals are representations of the internal. But I don't want to sit there for 3 hours and learn about Shakiyat al-Salat, right? I don't have the time for that. And if I'll ask my brother, if I miss my ruku, for example, or sujood, what do? I can ask him. I don't have to go and study it unless I want to be a sheikh. But we have Sheikh Google today. We don't need even sheikhs. We don't need sheikhs today. We need just Google. So I don't need to do that. And this focus on it, this absolutely overarching obsession with externals, right? Yes, absolutely. All of these fiqh, basically. Fiqh originally doesn't mean rules, do's and don'ts, and rules and regulations. It means knowledge of Allah. By the time of Ghazali, it had already been turned into something else. There was a semantic shift, and fiqh suddenly meant something that it didn't mean originally in Quran. Ilm is the same. Ilm means ilmullah. Whereas today it has I'm not saying that's the only meaning, but we've lost that central meaning. And we focus on these issues. I went once to Malaysia, and I was in Kuala Lumpur, and someone said, there's a brilliant Islamic bookshop. And I was for it. We went. Half of the shop was on fiqh, just fiqh. Half of the shop was on jihad. What about akhlaq? What about Allah? What about, nothing. Nothing at all. So Nursi talks about mu'min ghayr Muslim and Muslim ghayr mu'min. He says there are lots of Muslims who are not mu'min. Lots of Muslims don't have iman really, don't know. They believe because their parents believed. We can't do that. We can't do that. We have to investigate. And it's constant. It's supposed to be continuous. God is creating continuously. Do we not need to respond continuously and in a different way?
But now it's even worse.
Yes.
Now they say I'm Muslim by name, or I'm Muslim by religion.
Then the third thing, I might not have mentioned them here, but it's the influence of Western and European culture on the Muslim world. I'm not going to blame everything on the West. Being a product of the West, there are lots of great things about the West. There's lots of great things about Judeo-Christian civilization that we can learn from. There's lots of great things about Western culture we can learn from, but there are lots of toxic things that we have to avoid. We have to know the difference. We can't just accept it blindly. And when you put your child in a state school in England, with very few exceptions, there are Catholic schools and there are Church of England schools, forget it. But Catholic schools, maybe, to a certain extent, they'll get a little something. But you put your child at state school, what you're doing, you're giving your child to strangers so that the strangers can fill them with rubbish. I'm sorry, this is not an extremist thought. You put your child for 6 hours a day with people that you don't know, telling them things that you don't agree with, and then you wonder why your child rebels. Homeschool your children, for heaven's sake. I'm not talking to you, I'm just talking in general. And so what happens is, when you live in a secular society, you start to think, like, have you heard of Stockholm Syndrome?
Yeah.
We have Stockholm Syndrome. We've been kidnapped. Is it kidnapped?
Kidnapped.
Yeah.
Yes, kidnapped.
You've been kidnapped. It's not like in Yemen where people used to get kidnapped and they loved it. They would stay with the kidnappers. They would. I know people who've been kidnapped in Yemen. I talked with 2 people and they got kidnapped in Yemen. They were kept for 3 weeks. They didn't want to leave.
Wow.
They didn't want to leave.
Wow.
They had such a wonderful time.
Why? Was it the food?
Food, protection, sohbah, everything. There were groups trying to prove a point, so they kidnapped a couple of academics, held them for a few weeks, but were wonderful to them. Better than a hotel. Better than a hotel, they said. But Stockholm Syndrome, I don't know what happened in Sweden, they didn't want to leave their kidnappers.
I think the kidnapped person fell in love with, began to like and excuse the atrocities of the person who was maltreated and mistreated.
We're doing the same. We've done the same. We've been kidnapped. Some countries were physically colonized. Those that weren't physically colonized were culturally colonized, economically colonized, and still, decolonization has never happened. Only in name, you know. Only, for example, I don't know, Nigeria became independent at that point, but they only became independent in name because Western educated elites are still controlling most of Africa, still controlling most of the Middle East. And I'm not a West basher at all. I'm not bashing the West at all. But I'm bashing this what happened, you know. And it's just so that it happened in the West. But the thing is, we have to be hopeful because we know that the sun at the end of time is going to rise from the West, right? So the sun set in the West. You know, this is the sun setting, right? Everything I've been saying today is the sun setting. But it will rise in the West, so we have to be hopeful. So it's not just bashing the West. And finally, we have a fetish for science. We have a fetish for science and technology. And we suffer a sense of inferiority. Now, I'm not anti-science. The scientific method is what we used as Muslims in the so-called Golden Age, right? The scientific method is where you prove cause and effect. That's all that the scientific method is. Most of the so-called sciences today have nothing to do with the scientific method. They are ideologically driven. They are driven by pseudoscience, pretend science, scientism, and I'm sure you've heard of these things. Scientists who think that science can answer every question. They've never done an experiment in their life. It's all theory, untested theory. And the scientific, and we buy this. Because as soon as we hear the word scientific, it's like magic, you know. If it's scientific, it must be good. That's one thing. Correlation of the word scientific with the word good, and the word progressive, and the word, what's the fourth one? Proven as well. But it's good, and it's progressive, and it's true. Right? And no, not necessarily. But we don't buy that, you know. I didn't do science. So when I was a kid and I was sitting on the television and said, oh, scientifically proven, right? This shampoo will you know, it's going to turn you into, you know, some god, and it's been scientifically proven. So you rush out. You know what they're doing is actually, this is not magic. It's sihr, because they're trying to change your mind. So advertising is you know, the Pharaoh, you know, the sorcerers at the time of Pharaoh are today's scientists. The unbelieving scientists, because what they do, they want to mess with your mind. It's not magic, it's sorcery. It's conditioning. It's conditioning. And so as Muslims, because of our sense of inferiority, we want to be part of the game. You know, we want to join the game, we want to join the table, we want a place at the table. So we are ready to sell our deen down the river to become part of the scientific community, which is why today you will see books trying to justify evolution. There's one published recently, and the author is saying, right, we can accept this. The only thing we can't accept is that Adam alayhi salam was not a product of evolution. So if you, Mr. Scientist, can, you know, please accept us, but just let us believe that Adam alayhi salam was directly created. The scientist is going to laugh him out of the room. You either accept all of it or none. But we're so desperate. I don't know why we're desperate, but we are. So yeah, those are the four things.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Quick question.
I'm done. I'm finished now. So
Okay.
anyway.
So even like, as you said, when we name the Golden Age as Golden Age in Islamic history, isn't that again so scientific, modernist way of thinking to put the name, because all these translations, which are actually damaging a lot, Aristotelian books and all these scientific findings and this and that, because of this, in that time we have Golden Age of Islam.
That's a great point, Tuba. It's a great point. And I've had problems with that, and I was a bit scared to say that. I was going to say something similar, but not as articulately as you said it.
Okay.
Golden Age is, first of all, subjective, right?
Yeah.
For me, what the Golden Age of Islam is, I don't know. I haven't thought about it enough. But Golden Age is right. You've had your Golden Age, guys. The rest has been downhill. Look at you. That's what they say. So no, our Golden Age is now. Right? Our Golden Age is now because we're waking up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, look at you here today.
Other than the age of belief.
This is golden, really, right? Okay. All these people coming in from all over the world, well, Canada and UK. Anyone not from Canada or the UK, from somewhere else? Sorry, where are you from, brother?
Nigeria.
Nigeria. I mentioned Nigeria. You should have said when it became independent. I didn't know. So look at this. This is golden. So there's no golden age, but there are golden moments, right? So we have to really make use of the golden moments. Great question. A great point. Anyway, I'm done. Finished. Thank you.
You said that there's a. I think they commented also about the problem of the children to have this influx of the atheism. I think there is hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. يولد المرء على الفطرة أبواه يهوداني أو نصراني أو مجوساني. The role of the family is important in this educating the child, and also to prevent him from the outside. For this also I want to add that Ustad Mirza Saydusi in the 10th work of reciting Hashr Risala Sayyidah, he explained too much about this. And in Turkey, after what happened from the atheism times, this message played main role in developing about the Islam and faith in Turkey, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, I'm from Yemen, but I'm not going to
Please kidnap me. Take me away from this. I want to go. I've wanted to go to Yemen for so many years, and it's inshallah. Inshallah. Any questions?
I just wanted to point. I think you mentioned about how today we are pretty much handing our kids to people that do not have they have very opposite values, and handing it over. And I think that is really the elephant in the room, where that's what we're all here for, right? So you mentioned the word homeschooling. Now I understand but that's not everyone's cup of tea.
No, right? I understand. No,
so
I understand. Not everyone is able to do that because of work commitments and because of economic issues. I understand.
Not only that, maybe they're not capable.
Absolutely.
Of homeschooling as well.
Exactly.
We're assuming that every parent is.
No, I don't mean homeschool. I mean those. I've heard people complaining about their schools, their children's schools. They're learning this and they're learning that, and I say, well, look, if you're aware of that, then surely you know there's something wrong. Think of homeschooling. I'm not saying that someone who's on an economically sort of limited wage and doesn't have maybe the ability to do it for whatever reason that may be. No, it's unfortunate, but this is why we need community. This is why we need community.
Okay. To make that difference, to make that change in the schooling system, so that everyone can have an access to it, as opposed to few kids who have parents who could have
Okay, Jazakallah khair. I'm going to interrupt everyone. Very sorry, but we've gone over time. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Colin.
You're welcome.
It was very insightful, amazing, alhamdulillah.